Hello, my name is Dylan Montgomery, and I will be presenting my speech about living off the grid in Arizona. Starting off with my introduction, I said, have you ever influenced the urge to just quit everything that you're currently doing, travel deep into the woods, the green forest, and never interact with anyone again, and quietly live in a self-sustaining peace? If you have, then you are insane, but I feel the same way. Today you will be walking out of this classroom knowing exactly how to successfully live off the grid. Living off the grid is a rewarding, self-sustainable way to live that is founded upon basic survival. I first heard about living off the grid when I was 16 years old, a local story of a couple living off the grid in the woods of Williams, Arizona, about 2 hours from where I live now. I grew up intrigued and it inspired me. Ever since, I've often found myself considering choosing a life off the grid. My main plan versus it being my backup plan if college doesn't work out. I will be covering the steps to take to successfully live off the grid, starting with choosing a location, organizing self-sustaining living necessities, and transitioning to a new lifestyle. In order to get started on living off the grid, you'll first need to figure out where it is that you want to be. My first main point that I want to go over is choosing a location. One of the biggest factors to take into consideration when choosing a location to live off the grid would be the seasonal weather patterns for region and environmental benefits. Number one, the problems that you will face in a life of living off the grid are largely determined by the location that you choose and the different acclimates from the weather that you endure. According to Doug Williams, an author of Outdoor Survivals, for the best states to live peacefully off the grid, the best places to live include Hawaii because of the tropical climate, fertile soil, and exceptional rainfall. Missouri, and a second one being Missouri because of the lack of many living regulations from farm-friendly weather and affordable property costs. Washington State because of the balanced weather, abundance of rain, and ability to raise livestock. The final best place to live off the grid would be in Oregon because of the various off-grid communities, stable weather, and tranquil woodlands. My personal ideal location to live off the grid would be deep in the lush of forest in Washington State. Since the geographical region has now been chosen, it is time to determine where to place your new home. It must be noted that in order to choose a plot of land to live on, another important factor to take into consideration would be determining the cabin's proximity and the natural resources. Author Cam offers helpful tips in choosing a location in his journal article, Lessons from Living Off the Grid. Taking a hike throughout the forests of Washington State will help us prospect the land when choosing a site for a home that will be self-sustaining. You will want to make sure you choose a place near a fresh water source, fertile soil, adequate sunlight, and sustainable place for raising livestock. If we fast forward to the following summer, we finally have our self-sustaining cabin in the forests of Washington State, complete with all the necessities: solar panels, solar thermal collectors, a hydro turbine, a water tank, and a composting toilet, and a wind turbine. The second main point would be organizing self-sustaining living necessities. In order for a cabin to be self-sustaining and ready to be efficiently off the grid, there is a checklist of necessities that need to be configured. A simple guide to creating and maintaining a self-reliant supply of energy, water, shelter, and more. Detailed advice with a journal article that would be helpful as properly prepared would be the main things that are needed to be classified in the three main categories of water, energy, and food. A nearby water source such as a freshwater creek is vital to survival while being far away from any other civilization. Your cabin should have a water tank to collect and store water that has been collected from a freshwater source and water that has been collected from rain. Thanks to the help of author Andrew, we know that in the cabin we will need a filtration system to ensure the water is safe to drink acclimator to have pressurized water usable for showers, sinks, and a hot water cylinder to storm the warm water from the space that is being heated while running. Heating and warm water is not only needed to consume and to use domestically, but it can also be used to produce energy as well, and can be converted through a hydro turbine. With author Andrew, he also highlighted for us, we do not realize just how much energy we individually consume per day, but as a word of advice, you will want multiple sources of energy to provide your cabin. Great natural energy converters are solar panels, wind turbines, and solar thermal collectors. However, these systems will crash eventually without an electricity grid or a control box. The most basic source of energy that is essential to keeping the cabin warm during winter months and during the summer and during the nights would be fire. A fireplace is not just the things below your TV. It is extremely crucial to survival, to stay warm, dry, cook, and eliminate darkness. Once we have a sustainable water and energy supply, the last main living necessity that we need would be food. It is of our best interest to become an expert gardener. If you are living off the grid because the closest grocery store could be over 50 miles away, luckily in Washington State, the soil is fertile, and we chose a good plot of land with enough space for a large garden to grow different produce with the warm weather permitting. We also made sure that our plot of land had enough space for our livestock animals such as pigs and goats and chickens. It is also in your best interest to become a skilled hunter and a fisherman, because that is what will be crucial in your survival in the wilderness. The last bit of necessities you will need to live off the grid in your self-sustainable cabin fall under this categorization of tools, transportation, and recreation. Jim discusses the different tools someone will want to use while living off the grid in his journal article, Unplugging. Living off the grid, tools are absolutely vital to survival because you cannot hunt, fish, cook, clean, garden, or repair things without tools. Author Jim also highlights the importance of having a mess of transportation. Even though you have chosen to live off the grid and want to be far away from people, you will still need a motorized transportation vehicle of some sort in the case of an emergency situation or the need or desire to travel. One of the key items for me personally would be possessing a small boat to fish, hunt out of, and travel places quickly, using the nearby river and lake systems, in addition to leisurely spending time in the boat to relax and enjoy my surroundings. The last necessities are involved around recreational needs and are not quite as important as the previously listed necessities, but possessing recreational things such as games, books, paint, or a guitar are all excellent ways to relax and have fun while you enjoy your peaceful life in a seclusion. These items are things that are crucial for our minds and overall happiness and well-being. With that being said, I would not recommend bringing your Xbox or PlayStation because it will use up a lot of your energy, resources, and it would inhibit you from experiencing the beauty surrounding you. However, a dog is always a great idea. You are now living the dream, peacefully living in a seclusion without the traditional stressors of Phoenix rush hour or traffic or working for hours on end to end. For end to end, and to find out your low score is a 21%. You no longer have to worry about anything. It is time to relax and transition to the new lifestyle of everyday vacation. The third main point is transitioning to a new lifestyle. I have unfortunately not lived off the grid yet, but authors Annie, Garden, and Perry all have described their pictures of living off the grid in Canada. The way of living off the grid, as described in the journal article Away from It All, a remote Canadian log cabin, proves that living off the grid doesn't necessarily mean you have to rough it. It's exciting, tranquil, refreshing, and very spiritually healing. This couple does not live off the grid year-round, but rather during warm months of the season in Canada, so their perspective of off-the-grid living is closer to visiting a summer cabin for an extended period of time. However, they describe their experiences as something so wonderful. It indicates me and causes me to feel more drawn to wanting to experience this for myself. Moving deep into the woods as described as living in paradise by most. However, author Ben gets very realistic with his experience living off the grid, and he discusses it wonderfully at the first, but after a long time in isolation, it becomes horrible. Throughout the entire speech, I have been discussing how amazing living off the grid would be, but I have not touched on any downsides quite yet. But Ben provides his real experience living in a self-sustaining cabin in the woods, and he discusses the good and bad sides about this type of living, which was fantastic. Ben describes the first few warm months away from everything was extremely healing for him. However, after his first few months living off the grid alone, it started to turn into an autumn, and an autumn turned into winter, leaving Ben feeling quite the opposite of how he felt months prior. Ben reported that he was feeling depressed and alone, and the demanding daily physical activities had him tired and sick of being stuck in the woods. Eventually, winter had passed and spring was finally back. Ben started to feel happier when the temperature started to warm up, but all he wanted to do was to leave and go back to traditional living and civilization. This is a very real possibility that could happen to anyone if they decide to live off the grid. But ultimately, Ben was not meant to live off the grid, and now he continues to live his happily life once again. It is a decent risk moving and living off the grid, especially if you are not properly prepared and have basic survival knowledge. However, everyone is different, and what might have not worked for someone may be perfect for someone else. In conclusion, I have explained the steps to take to successfully live off the grid, starting with choosing a location, organizing self-sustaining living necessities, and transitioning to the new lifestyle. The purpose of the speech was to educate my audience about living off the grid and how they can take steps to live off the grid themselves. The main focus of the speech was discussing how living off the grid is a very rewarding, self-sustainable way to live that is founded upon basic survival. Living that lifestyle is simply not for everyone, just like anywhere else. You will still face challenges, but they may be different challenges from what you would experience in traditional community setting. I hope you all feel confident enough to hike and prospect locations for your self-sustainable home. Thank you.